I am very lucky to be joined by one of the premier photographers, probably across the globe. She's coming to us from Ottawa, Canada. She's been a photographer for over 4 decades. She's an Nikon Ambassador. She's part of the she's a Canadian Geographic photographer in residence, and she was a recent recipient of the Order of Canada back in 2022. Very happy to speak with Michelle Valberg today. Michelle, it's, like I said, wonderful to meet you, to talk to you in person. How's everything going with you?
Fantastic. And thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Absolutely.
Yeah, we were just talking prior to recording everything that it's cold up there in Ottawa, and I was hoping you could push some of the cold this way to California a little bit for not only the residents, for our Wolf residents that are here, but also some of the folks we can get some relief from some of the heat. It's been a very warm winter, quote unquote, here, but you have such...
I have to say, though, you can send the heat up here.
We could do that. We can rotate. That's fine. I'll push the wind this way. We'll switch the high and low pressure. Just with someone with such a long and decorated career like this, how did your journey begin? Because to be doing something that you are so passionate about for this length of time, what were the seeds of photography for you as a young woman, even as a young girl maybe, and how did all of this get started for you? What was it in Canada? Where did you grow up? Are you native Canadian? How did this all begin?
I grew up in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, and I was a golfer. So the long and the short of it is that I really wanted to be on the pro circuit. I wanted to be a pro golfer. That was my dream. I was going to go down to the U.S. and on a golf scholarship. And then one day my father gave me his camera. I was actually going to Lake Placid, and he said, just take the camera, see what you think, take a few photos. You know, he was an avid photographer, and I went down, and I still remember the shot. It was through the trees. It was fall. It was a river. I had no idea what I was doing. And I came back and I said, okay, so I'm going to be a photographer. And my father looked at me and he said, oh, good. And what else? What else would you like to be? You can't possibly think that you're going to make a living or be a photographer. And I said, yeah, I'm going to be a photographer. It was like a light switch went on. And what a gift, because I was only 17 at the time. And what a gift to be able to have something brought into your life and that you could run with. So I went to university. I went to the fine arts program at Ottawa U, and then I went to Algonquin College, which was more of a technical school. I didn't get that much technical training at the university, and I had really amazing teachers, really great profs that took an interest in me and really pushed and spent a lot of time with me, and cornered me at the end exhibition, and he said, if you don't, his name was Gunter, scared the living daylights out of everybody. And he said, if you don't do anything with that career of yours, I'm going to come kick you in the ass myself. I'm like, okay. But I had started my business through the university program just because I wanted to get my feet wet, especially in a male-dominated industry back then. And I was young. I was super young, and I was female. So it was like, how do you fit in, right? How do you make a name? How do you even start? So I started my business while I was in university, and then when I finished university, I went headfirst into it, but in the video production side. So again, another switch came on, and there was not really anything in the middle ground of video production back then, not like anything it is today. And,
Absolutely.
Early on, there was that transition between 8mm and 16mm, and people were getting into, the beta cams and that, but then there was this high end. So I came in kind of in the middle end because it was really low production or else really high. I couldn't come in at the high level. And then I met a need, people wanting to do wedding videos, and I did insurance videos, and I transferred how many 8mm and 16mm and photos to video, and I was putting to the music, and so it was like whatever I could do to make a living at photography. And that meant just, kind of diversifying a little bit and bringing in video production and, fitting a need that was out there at that time that wasn't being met by a lot of companies. So I started working with the photographers, and I had that little background. I could go and film a wedding and watch the photographers work. And I felt like a little bit of a spy. But what a great opportunity to be able to learn, still, run my own business and be a part of the photography industry, but from the video production side. So, and then once it skyrocketed, I think I did like 10 weddings, and then I did 45, and then I did 60. I mean, it was crazy. And then I reintroduced video, and I had 13 people working for me, reintroduced photography. 1 year, and any photographer out there will probably cringe at the thought of me even saying this, that 1 year we even did 115 weddings in 1 year.
Wow.
But talk about what an incredible experience to be able to learn how to think fast, act fast. This is when, you've got 12 frames or 24 frames with Hasselblad. You had to take control of the situation. You had to look for light. You had to manage everything. You had to manage people, and you had to think quick. You had to capture that moment. So I had no idea that photographing weddings could have provided such amazing experience, I guess, that I could bring forward to doing what I really love.
Man, talk about the difference in the process, because I've known people who've photographed weddings specifically, or family portraits and things like that, and it's very different. What's the difference in the way that you look through the lens with the work that you do now, or probably more so when you're talking about wildlife landscapes, the conditions that you're surrounded by now, as opposed to when you're shooting something, it almost seems like run and gun style when you're at a wedding or things of that sort?
That is such a great question. It all comes down to the emotional connection, right? And when you're photographing weddings, what you're trying to do is create that beautiful emotion between a man and woman in a very, very special day. And what is going to set your work apart more so than anybody else is if you can really, really bring that out, that emotion out of that couple, which isn't always easy to do. And when I'm photographing wildlife, it's exactly what I'm trying to do in every image that I create, is to bring that emotion, create that emotional impact, so my viewers can pay attention. They might stay a little bit longer on my images, or they might create their own story, or they might care a little bit more, whatever it might be. So it's the story, right? It's the story, and it's the emotion that really go hand in hand. And ultimately it comes down to almost so many different genres of photography. It's not just wildlife and portraits and weddings, but it really lends itself to so many different genres.
Go back to, just real quick, because it's such a wonderful light bulb moment that you shared with your dad giving you that camera, and you taking however many photos it was and switching this career. What do you think it was? If you look back on it now, you say you don't know, but can you recollect anything at that moment was it something wanting to be more creative that was unlocked, or was it something hiding that you just didn't know existed? What do you think, if you had to put your finger on it?
Totally hidden. I had no idea. I wasn't part of the art community. My mother was my parents taught us to appreciate nature and brought us out into nature, and it was a big part of our upbringing. But my mom was also a docent at the National Art Gallery, and so she had a love affair with the art world. But I never connected it to it with her deeply. Like, I was always interested, and I would go on her tours, and it was always of interest, especially with the art around the house. So I think that I had a very close relationship with my parents. So I think growing up with those kinds of I guess, what do you call it? Influences. It was maybe deep down, but it wasn't until I picked up that camera and I created that I went, this is something I've got to do.
Because it's so great, because it's creatively, it takes something almost, like you said, completely out of your comfort zone, or the thing that you're focused on as a young adult, to say, I have this focus, I'm going to do this, and then to completely shift gears. As you said, your dad, I'm sure, was like, and what else? Which is such a great reaction. But as you also touched on something, because we just spoke with Hannah Rayom, and she's another female photographer in the space. And you mentioned this, and I'm happy to connect the dots because she mentioned the same thing as being a female photographer in a very male-dominated space. For you, carving out this great niche, what is it that you hope to achieve every time that you're looking behind the lens? Do you scout out trips? Do you go in looking for certain shots? What is Michelle Valberg's sort of, prep when you're going out into the field to photograph anything?
Oh, with a whole lot of hope, especially with wild, right? I mean, in the studio, when you're shooting, you have control over the subject. You can tell them how to move, pose. You can do lighting. You have hair. You have makeup. You're in total control. When you're out in the wild, you have absolutely zero control over the climate, over the weather, over the appearance of any kind of animal that you're hopeful of seeing, to having something miraculous happen. I mean, it's an unknown. So when I go out, I guess I go trying to lower my expectations, because I think going in with greater expectations, like I'm going to go see a spirit bear, and, you don't, or I'm going to go to Yellowstone, I'm going to see the wolves, and you don't. I mean, there's so much set up for disappointment, I guess, that I try to be open and positive and bring that energy. And I think that makes a huge difference as well. When you go out there, it's up to us to bring that energy out to the world, to be able to maybe welcome an animal into your space. And, if you're fortunate enough to have an encounter. So I try to be open, as minded as I possibly can, and lower my expectations, and hopefully exceed in every way when you come out, but also know that we are gifted with huge disappointments as well, right? In the wildlife world, huge disappointments. So yeah.
Yeah, you got to be humble, kind of, right?
Totally humbled all the time, right? Whether you have it or you don't, we're the visitors,
Yeah. I mean, when you're out there, because this is something else that we keep speaking about with a lot of our photographer guests that we have, and it comes down to, because people will ask about the equipment. What's the camera that you're shooting on? What's the equipment that you have? And you are a Nikon ambassador. And what does it say from your experience in doing the things that you do to explain to folks that it's your vision behind the camera as opposed to the camera doing the work? Do you ever run into those conversations, and how does that sort of go?
Absolutely, especially earlier on, maybe not so much now, because when I look around, or I just had a tour, a workshop, and everybody has the same equipment as me. Before I'd have the 800 5.6, or, I had the D5. So people weren't necessarily investing that kind of money into that kind of equipment. You always stood out a little bit more than you do now. Everybody's walking around with an 800 millimeter 5.6 or 6.3, or, the whatever camera company that you have in your hand. There's just so much more available to us than there ever was before. So now, or certainly back then, it was way more prevalent that you would say, well, you have an 800 5.6, that's a $20,000 lens, that's why you got that image. Or, people were always clamoring to know what kind of image or what kind of camera equipment that you had, because they felt that was like the primary source of your success, right? And it really doesn't matter. I'm proud to be a Nikon ambassador. I've shot Nikon my entire career. My dad gave me his FM, and I've never looked back. But it doesn't matter what kind of equipment that you work with. It's what's in your hand, right? And there's that saying, right? The best camera is the one that's in your hand. So getting outside of that, it's the eye. And it took me, when I went to Ottawa U, I thought everybody saw the same as me. I was working a 4x5 camera. I was working the Hasselblad, and then we even had to use a Brownie. We had to take all the opportunity away and go to a very basic Brownie. That's probably a word that a lot of people don't know. You probably are too young to even have seen a Brownie. But you're limited in every single way by the frames that you have, by horrible lens that you have, the small little camera. So it was really understanding how we all see so differently. And that's the beauty of photography. And it really has nothing to do with, of course, the better equipment you have, the better opportunities, that you might have in post-production, or, it's going to help you if you have good equipment. There's no doubt about it. But really, it comes down to everybody's eye and the way that you use your creativity and your storytelling that is going to set you apart.
Why is storytelling for you, or what makes the storytelling and the imagery that you go to? And those of you that are listening, we're going to get to, Michelle gave us a bunch of photos, so we're going to go through some of them. And she did see wolves on her trip to Yellowstone, just a teaser there, and we'll talk about that story. But when you talk about storytelling, because it is so innate in any creative space, whether I said this with Hannah, right? We're talking whether it's art, watercolor, chalk, pencil, video, film, everything is subjective, obviously. But for you, what are the main keys that you try to hit across when you do any sort of storytelling across those two mediums, especially photography and visual? What are you going in looking to achieve and looking to help your audience see with the eye that you're seeing it with?
Yeah. Again, I think if we go back to what we were talking about that emotion, right? The emotional impact. And I think if we get people to care, if we get people to stop at an image because it reminds them of maybe their animal, their dog, or an emotion that they want, or they crave, or they've had themselves, if we can attract our viewers with an emotional image, then I think we're going to be more powerful storytellers. There's no doubt about it. And it's not always there. You might have a beautiful portrait of an owl sitting on a stump and he's staring right at you, but those eye to eye, those eyes staring right through you. So I would say that that's probably the biggest thing that I try to do with all of my visual storytelling, is that you're just trying to attract and make people care, make people want to look and know more, possibly. And this is where the conservation comes in. So I think if we all care a little bit more, or if you attract people, a lot of it, you just think that people know, or they would think that you would think that they would know more, or that they would care, or that they would know that, what I ask people all the time, have you ever heard of a spirit bear, or a coastal wolf, or, a species like, even the little ermine, people are like, well, what is that? And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, they want to know more. I mean, that's our ability as visual storytellers to create conversation, create interest, and education and caring.
Yeah. Because you host a lot of these. I noticed on your website there are courses that you can take, or workshops that you have. What are the aims of that? Obviously, is it educating about just photography in general, or is it more layered than that? When you talk about bringing the public into your space and understanding maybe how your vision works, but how for them to tap into their vision, what are those courses and workshops trying to tailor it to?
Like when I was in the studio, we can go back and forth with all of this, but when somebody came in for their portrait, it was about the experience as much as it was about creating a really good photograph. So when people are coming on workshops with me, and we're going into Yellowstone and we're spending, 4 intensive days in the field and then working at night through image review, that sort of thing, I want them to have an experience that transcends the photography, that it's more than just the photography. And it's their ability to stretch their imagination, to go out of their comfort zones. Like it was minus 54 Fahrenheit at one point. I mean, it was the coldest thing. Everyone was uncomfortable. And come away with, like, putting down your camera in a moment when you're surrounded by howling wolves, and you have a moment outside of what it is that brought us there, which was primarily the photography. But if you can cry with somebody at the thought of what you're witnessing, I mean, that if there's an experience, if there's one way that I can get people to feel differently than they did coming in or have ever experienced before, that's more important to me than learning, I need to shoot at 10,000th of a second to get that ermine running through the snow. we all know the basics, or everybody who comes on the workshops have a general knowledge of the basics and the triangle and all the exposure, compensation, whatever it is that they need to do to get a good image. It's just, how do you get them out of that technical side? It's like golf too. It's like, okay, forget about the technical side of the golf, feel it, really, really feel it. And it comes down to that in every way. Same as my online course called Wild Encounters. It was bringing people into the space of Tom McPherson from Seaforth Expeditions, taking people onto an expedition or into an expedition that they wouldn't otherwise maybe have had in the past or will have in the future, and bring them with you and show them the flubs and the 16 hours a day that it takes to get an image. So yeah, I've gone on a little bit of a tangent there, but really it's about the experience along with the photography that I think that I try to make people walk away with a little bit more, maybe a little bit more in their hearts, right? And their ability to share their own story with people, to make those other people, because they're the new stewards of wherever place that we went to. So, they've got a job themselves to tell the people in their lives what they experienced.
That's such a great point that you make of getting out of the technical or out of our heads, because sometimes people just get so, inside of themselves, where they're like you said, looking for the right aperture, frame rate, whatever it is, or having the equipment and hoping, and this is not to speak to anyone in particular or a group of people in particular, but when you spend the money on whatever the equipment is, depending upon what it could be canvases, brushes, lenses, but I love that you're getting people out of that mindset and saying, even if you just have used brushes or, a used camera or something, you can still make something special, because it's the story that's being told from your side on the other end of the lens, which is always something that we lose possibly by thinking about possible perfectionism or whatever somebody may be looking for.
Exactly. And people get caught up in the technical side, and it's important. Of course, know your techniques, know your technical side, know your camera inside and out, know all that, but know all that before you go out into the field. Spend the time with it. Go into a dark room and, use your hand, your coordination, your muscle memory to figure out your settings, so you can do that in the dark, that you know exactly what you're doing with your camera without having to look at it. So when you are in the field, then you can feel comfortable in knowing how you can shoot, but then you can spend more time on the creative side of or waiting for that anticipation, or waiting for that moment to come to fruition, and knowing when it steps into the right light, all that kind of stuff. Like it's the extras, it's the second part, know your camera, know your technical side, and then be way more prepared for when magic happens and you can create that image that you've always dreamed of.
Absolutely. So what we're suggesting, folks, is to go into a dark room and figure out your camera, so before you go out there. I really want to, because I saw this on your bio, and I saw this through I think your social media, about you being the recipient of the Order of Canada, and I'd love for you to explain what this achievement really means. Overall, just describe it, and then what it means for you to have received this honor and to have that. So tell everybody what that's about.
Well, thank you. I was a recipient of the Order of Canada in 2022. It is the highest civilian honor for a Canadian. So yeah, it's pretty special. I still think that they called the wrong phone number, but when he called to tell me that, asked me if I would receive it, I said, I think you have the wrong phone number. But yeah, I was nominated from a very dear friend of mine who took her 3 years, and it is a massive honor. But it's not because I'm a photographer that I received it. It's what I've done with my photography. So it's about giving back. And as visual storytellers, we really have an enormous opportunity to help organizations or charitable places that need imagery, or use your work for conservation or donations. I did a book on HIV and AIDS. I had no idea how to do a book. I just wanted to share that my friend died of HIV and AIDS and it affects us all. And then I did a book on Canadian women, and I wanted to show women who have survived a deadly disease, to business women, to a mom of 17 boys, and they all went to university. So it extended way beyond my photography, in that I've donated so much of my time and my work to a number of organizations, including starting my own not-for-profit called Project North, and has nothing to do with photography, but we bring up hockey equipment to the northern communities in the Arctic, including bringing up the Stanley Cup. So yeah, it's more than just being a photographer that I was receiving this, and I'm deeply honored. Of course, we never do anything and thinking that we're going to receive anything back. You're doing to give and to make a difference, right? So when I was told that I was a recipient, I cried. I was silent. I couldn't speak for probably 5 minutes, and the guy on the other end of the phone is like, "It's okay, Michelle." As you can tell, I'm a very emotional person, so crying for me it comes very easy. And so photographers, like, if you want to get your name out there too, go into your community and start work in your community, and go to a local hospital or the children's hospital, and create some imagery that they can use in their websites or in their social media, whatever it might be. Their annual reports, and it's amazing what you get back from being able to experience these places and these people. And the gift is all ours when we're able to walk into a room and be able to photograph somebody who is maybe suffering, or or on the total other end of the scale, and just received a medal or won a gold medal or whatever it might be. We have a great gift to be able to give back.
It's such a beautiful connection to make, as you just stated, being a visual storyteller and sharing that globally, or even countrywide, whatever it may be. And my congratulations. I know it's 3 years after, but still, it's such a beautiful honor that's bestowed upon folks that are able to make a difference and to do the things that you do as a visual storyteller. So congratulations, 3 years after, but it's such wonderful work. I mean, to your imagery, because I won't tease it much longer, because it's I didn't let her onto the Zoom too quick because I was busy checking out the photos she sent. But before we get to the seawolves, which, to be fair, becoming one of my favorite animals, and so you mentioning Tom McPherson and Seaforth again is always great. And Tom, if you're out there, hope you're listening. But talk about this recent trip to Yellowstone, because we had to postpone. You had some shoots get moved around, but you went to Yellowstone and you had this incredible experience with wolves and bison. So talk a little bit about that and what you were looking to gain out of that trip and what you ended up coming back with in terms of not only photos, but in terms of maybe the connections you made there.
Yeah, so I was working on this workshop with Bozeman Camera with Marshall, and I had another videographer that came with me, Miv, who has been my colleague here. We had 7 participants, and we went into West with the snow coaches, and our 4 days were specifically there. And the first 2 we found wolf tracks, and I'll tell you, the Wapiti pack were there. The buzz was out, right? The tracks were there. We never saw them, just the tracks. 3rd day, we went to Old Faithful and did the other side. And then ended up coming back into the Hayden Valley. And as we were coming in, there was another vehicle going out, and they stopped and they had these big smiles. And they said, "Do you really want to know?" And we're like, "Yes." And they said 19 wolves. One was in front of our truck howling. And we're like, 19 wolves. And of course, you're all going, ugh, you're gutted, absolutely gutted, because you just were on the other side. You'd spent 2 full days there. As we know, this is wildlife photography. So we went in anyway, and we were looking for them. Nothing. Saw the tracks, saw where they went off. We thought they were going to Mary Mountain Pass. because the large herd of bison were congregating in that area. Anyway, the next morning we all woke up, and when I talked to you about energy, you know, what we bring to it, we were all like pumped. We were going right into Hayden. We weren't going to stop. We were first ones in the park. Everybody was early. We jumped into the vehicle. It was like everything was just boop, 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 boop. I have terrible altitude sickness. And I had been suffering every other morning, but this morning I was fine. And we got in and we just booted it. We didn't even stop for a pee break. We didn't even ask anyone if they wanted to stop for a pee break. We were like, let's go find the wolves. They're in Hayden. Let's go. So off we went, and Marshall was at the front with me, and he looked and he said, there's a coyote running. No, it's a wolf. There's another wolf. There's another wolf. There's another wolf. There's another wolf. And what we had heard and when we saw the tracks, is that they were in smaller groups. So 4, 5, 9. The Wapiti, I believe, is 26 in total now. So they had all come together. So there were 23 of them, 23 wolves. And of course, in that beautiful valley, you can see forever. And they were running. I'm vibrating, even like my legs are shaking at the reminder of this moment. And so we got out, we jumped, we took some photos. They were quite a distance away. And then we were trying to anticipate kind of where they were going to come around the bend, and if they were going to follow the same path as that they had the day before, that they would pass over this creek. So we were like, okay, let's head in that direction. And then, yeah, they were howling everywhere. They were howling at each other. There were a couple left over here. Like, we had a vision of 20. We could see all 23, but they were all spread out and they were all talking to each other. I mean, that, right, you know, more than anybody. I mean, it's mind blowing. It's one of the most incredible experiences to be a part of. And it was really cold. It was I'm in Celsius, so it was minus 40 Celsius, which is the same minus 40 Fahrenheit. And it was cold. We couldn't even figure out if we were pressing our shutter.
Right.
Your breath is like, you know, causing your viewfinder to fog up, and you're trying to switch between video and photo, and you know, nothing's working, and you're just like, oh my God, this is crazy. So yeah, 2 of them came down towards the road and then went back up and sat on this hillside, and were howling at the others. And then, you know, beautiful black wolves against a blue sky with a white frosty snow. And they're talking, you know, we're keeping our distance. We were at least with a minimum 100 feet. And then all of a sudden, you know, we're in this moment, and Wendy and I put our cameras down, and we were having a moment. And then all of a sudden it was like, get in the car, get in the car, get in the car. Well, one of the wolves came on patrol and we're coming down the road. So I was like, get in the car, get in the car. So we all get into the coach, and then now we have a wolf right 3 feet from a black wolf right at our door. Fortunately, we all got into the vehicle, and that was crazy. I mean, this just went on. So then they congregated again, and then they went up onto a hillside. So I'm sorry this is so long, but it was so incredible. We had an entire day with them. And they went up on the hillside, and they all started sleeping. And then there was a couple of bison that were below them. And I just kept saying to everyone, just give it 3 more minutes, give it a little bit more. They're going to come down. They're going to start moving. They've rested. They're prime here. So then they went down in front of these 2 bison, and they started playing. And so I've never seen this behavior. I mean, they were in front of these bison. The bison were just standing there, and they were playing away, you know, doing all this kind of behavior. And then all of a sudden they just bolted, and they started on a line. They went to a smaller bison herd. So this is all day. Now we're clocking at the last few minutes that we have in Hayden. We got to get back. We got to be out of the park by 5.
Right.
And so we started following, and we had to go that way anyway. Well, they got to the bison herd, and then they had a full-on standoff. So there were three black wolves that were taking charge, and they were the two of them were the ones that were up on the hillside beside us. And yeah, they had a standoff. And any photographer listening could only imagine, and it doesn't even, you don't even have to be a photographer. We had to leave. We had to leave. See,
Yeah.
I'm shaking. We had to leave. We had to get out of the park, and it was going to get dark anyway. And we're going to go with it's going to get dark anyway. But so we left, and we knew that something was going to happen. And of course, it could take days or it could take hours, and they usually kill at night. And that was our last day. So we left not knowing. And then friends of ours were there the next day, and they witnessed the kill, actually, which is very unusual, I guess. It was in the daylight, and it was about 100 yards away.
Wow.
And yeah, they killed an adult, actually, a smaller adult, I guess. There were some babies. We figured that, the calves were in there, that they would go after that. But and then I saw that there was a bison charge. I don't know if you call it, not a charge, but they went a stampede. That's the word that I'm looking for. So the stampede went right for the snowmobilers and the other people that were there that morning. So yeah, it was incredible. The whole day we had with them, it was insane.
That's just like, you can't script it any better, honestly. I mean, that was that's great. I mean, and those are some of the photos I think you sent me, right? I think you sent me one of like the black wolf running down that hill of snow. I'm pretty sure that was one of them, or it was one that I saw on your Instagram, which is phenomenal. Against that, like you said, against that backdrop is unreal. If that was crazy. Yeah, it's so cool.
Even just the line of them running with the mountains in the background, and yeah, it was super, super cold. And when they were howling, you could see the breath. It was so cold. But I think their body temperature as well was so different than what the outdoor temperature was. There was a little bit of that, that aberration in the light, and that made it tough as well. Certainly important to shoot as many frames as you can, whatever your camera can handle, and because everything was changing so much. And then we had the natural streams, and or the creek that was letting off its own vapor. So there are all kinds of things going on that made it one of the toughest, most exhilarating shoots I think I've had.
What's the difference? Because you have incredible shots of sea wolves also, and I were these with Tom McPherson,
Yeah.
or were these okay?
Yeah.
So when you go into both of these places, because obviously there's differences. Obviously, we're talking about minus 40 degrees Celsius in Yellowstone. I don't believe it gets that cold over where they are in Vancouver Island. But what are the other challenges, and what's the type of stuff you have to pack out when you're going for multi-day trips like this? What are some of the things that you have to be aware of when you're switching from Yellowstone to, say, Seaforth?
Yeah, with Seaforth, off of Vancouver Island, it's the opposite. It's rain, it's wet. You're on a boat, or you're sitting on land, whatever the scenario is. You could potentially, it's one of the rainiest places. So, we had snow last year during the herring run, like that big, huge flakes of snow on the boat going out to, a nicer day to rain. I mean, you never know what you're going to get. So layers, you're constantly dressing in layers. One minute you might be hot, the next minute you might be cold. At least in Yellowstone, you just know you're going to be cold.
Right. Especially at that point.
Yeah. And likewise, the other challenge is, of course, working your camera in heavy rain, and making sure that it's protected, you're protected. But, that comes in itself with fogging, and then the transition of your camera gear from the wet, cold to the indoor dry with the fire. It's a constant battle of change, I guess, and how you're going to keep yourself dry and warm, how you're going to protect your gear and still shoot and maintain your composure when you're so close to a coastal wolf or a sea wolf. It's crazy. It's crazy.
When you talk about the length or the distance between, because most of the time in Yellowstone, it's rare, obviously, when you get wolves that come right up to the car across the road and things of that sort. Because I don't know how many folks that are listening here have been to see the coastal sea wolves. What's the distance you're normally talking about, and what are the things you have to be obviously rain you have to be prepared for, but are we talking the same types of distance that you would see in Yellowstone, a few hundred yards? Are we talking feet? Or is it vary depending upon where you are in that scenario?
Yeah, it totally varies. It varies on where, Tom is an expert at positioning and understanding the wolf behavior, especially the coastal wolves, the sea wolves. He's spent so much time with them. So he understands a little bit about their behavior, where they might come out of the forest. Positioning it's what it's all about, right? So I have been in a situation with Tom where we had a dead whale, and it was a dead humpback that had beached. So it was a known place where the wolves were feeding. We had a natural blind that we were using, and we had 4 wolves come. 3 didn't want to stick around, but one, we called him Wink. He stuck around, and he was really curious with us. And Tom was like, yeah, let's do the army crawl out on the rocks so we can get a nice low position. And so next thing you know, with a bad back, and anyway, it was crazy. And I was actually shooting with a 400 millimeter that I was testing for Nikon. So I was on their test, so nobody was allowed to know that I was shooting this. And I wasn't it was not the lens that I would have chosen, but I had to shoot with this 400 millimeter. It's the PF. So here we are, we're army crawling, and then all of a sudden Wink just stood up and he walked right to us. I mean, he was feet away, like 10 feet from us while we're lying on the ground. Curious, he barked at us and then walked away. And then we've had fleeting moments where, we've seen the wolf and we land, or Tom gets us on land, and then, he's a million miles away. So, wow. I believe that Tom is the wolf whisperer, especially with these. He's spent and invested an enormous amount of time in himself being with them, but bringing people out with him to experience them. And there's a huge amount of trust that I've seen with these wolves that they have in Tom. I know they know Tom. I know
that's why. Yeah. I've seen some of his videos too. He's very aware to not intrude to the point that it would be detrimental, which is always something that we like to promote. And obviously he does that. I know you do that. I'm looking at a couple of these. Are these the photos that you sent? Because there's one that has a little bit of a darker, I want to say like top part of the crown of his head. Are both of those Wink, or are those 2 different sea wolves? It's like, I think I'm trying to think.
I think they're both Wink. And the one was where you have the dead humpback in the background where he's looking back.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Where he's looking to the side.
That's the dead humpback. Man. Like people don't even know what that is, right? When they're looking at it. Because it had decayed for some time. So yeah, he knew we were there, even in the natural blind, which was so funny because you think that, we're hiding from the wolves. They don't know we're here. Meanwhile, they're fully aware that we're there. And so he was very curious, very kind, very, he was just, it was an incredible encounter at that moment. Wow. Especially when he was standing right in front of us, and it was like, okay, Tom, I'm lying on the ground with you, and we've got a wolf howling in front of us. What?
What's a better experience than that? I'd love to.
Oh, sorry. I'll just go back and echo.
Go ahead. Yeah, please go ahead.
Totally echo what you said, though. It's always, Tom, make sure that there's no behavior change, that you're always at a safe distance. It's when they approach you and what your attitude, and he is so good to just guide us through that experience as well. Just stay calm, stay still, no big movements. If you don't have your camera up to your eye, then wait for it to look away. He's taking every kind of precaution. So there's nothing that I have ever, and I have the utmost respect for him, because he will never make those animals change their behavior because of us. And it's always done with the utmost respect and for the animals, for sure.
And that's such a great point. And my next leading into that is what with storytelling. And I know we touched upon it earlier. Talk about the conservation aspect and the education aspect and why it's so important for you, and what are the tools that you try to impart on anybody that's doing an experience with you. When we talk about photographer ethics, we talk about, keeping your distance, making sure that you're promoting good ethical standards when taking photography or any visual medium for that matter, to make sure that it's as, if you don't get the shot, maybe you don't get the shot, as opposed to changing behavior.
Exactly. It is so, so important. And that's one of the things that we always start our workshops with, is the ethical behavior of us, and how important it is for us to continue to be able to go into these places, and for these animals to accept us as well. And if we're wanting to have those encounters, how important it is for us to be behaving properly in every way. I can't remember the next question that you had, or where that question was going. The importance of ethical.
Just the importance of like conservation in the work that you do, because you've been doing it for a long time, and obviously Tom imparts that as well in Seaforth. But you've had this long-standing, career with these types of situations. So what are some of the things that you try to teach and impart upon anybody that's looking for guidance in these situations?
Yeah, so I had actually a wolves exhibit at the Canadian Museum of Nature last year. It was actually on for a year. And it was one of the best exhibits that they had, because people have so much interest in wolves. It's a fascination. It's been in our folklore. It's been in our stories. But they've also been feared. So when you think, when that wolf was running down the road to us in Yellowstone, get in the car. We're getting in the car because you don't want to have any close encounter with the wolves there. You're not allowed to, but you don't want those animals becoming habituated. So, it's I never felt like we were in danger, and I've never felt, even with that wolf coming up to us and barking, and while we were lying on the ground, it was just this mutual respect, and I was never feared, or I was never fearful. And I think a lot of times where I was in that exhibition, and I would talk to people about the images that were up there, it was also a very educational exhibition, because it talked about the Indigenous relationship. It talked about how our dogs came from wolves. It talked about the research that the researchers are doing on the wolves. So it was a combination of not only my imagery, but of course an education piece for people who are visiting the museum. So, I think it's really important for us to share the experiences that we have, but it's also to teach, educate, explain, the relationships, which is what all you're about, is the human animal relationship. So, making, I guess, it more aware that we can have these relationships safely, and to not, while maintaining the full respect. I've kind of went off on a tangent there.
It's fine.
But it was really interesting for the wolves exhibit. Like, I was so proud to be a part of, this National Museum exhibit, but so incredibly happy to see the interest of people. And if you create that interest and that education and that knowledge in people, then they're going to become more aware and maybe stand up for the rights of the wolves, and that they understand that there is a hunt, and that there is a call, and and also, as more importantly, with the coastal wolves, or the sea wolves, I call them coastal wolves. So I know in reference, you were saying seawolves, that people don't even know that they exist, that they're not even labeled as a subspecies yet. So, you know, it's part of the whole conservation care storytelling aspect that all comes together and is so incredibly important for our viewers.
Absolutely. I just have a couple things before we wrap up. If you were to impart any wisdom or any sort of, somebody's listening to this and either wants to get started in photography or is in photography currently and they're stuck, what's a piece of, I don't want to say advice, but maybe that taken from Michelle Valberg experience, what would you say to them if they're either stuck or they're getting started? What would be something you would say to them if they're wanting
I
to get
think
into
like
photography?
anything, yeah, I love that question too. And I think it's like anything is care, be passionate and be committed, and if you're stuck, you don't have to go to these faraway places to be inspired by little creatures or big creatures. I'm looking out my window and we have a cottage on Charbot Lake, and I photograph it every morning that I can. I'm out on my kayak and I'm showcasing like raccoons and muskrats and mink and loons and birds and all kinds of species. And you can go to your local river or pond or lake or anywhere and find something that you can be that holds a special piece of your heart. Find something that you want to share with the world, like a story of a critter that like the loons are really important for me here. And my experiences changes from day to day, and then it can escalate into a drama to, oh my gosh, the babies are born and they're coming off the nest, and then their plight and having to survive, and there's two chicks and their ability to survive through the season is about 50%. So find your story and be passionate about it, I guess, is what it comes down to. And you don't have to be in these faraway places. It can be in your own backyard. And I think that ignites us. If you're being stuck, find something that really sparks your interest and feeds your soul. And if it feeds your soul, you're gonna be able to feed others too, because that's human nature, right? That's what the beauty of storytelling is. It's bringing it with passion and commitment, and people will tag along. That's what they've done with me anyway, and I'm really thankful for all my viewers and people that have stuck by me and really, encouraged me and supported me through my career, because man, we're lucky to do what we do.
That's phenomenal. That's such a great piece of advice. Anybody who wants to see your work either in person or online or take a class or a workshop, what are the best places to see any of the stuff that you're doing?
Online, probably michellevalberg.com. I'm posting a lot on Instagram. I'm almost up there every day, usually in tandem with what I'm experiencing at the time. If I'm lucky enough to be on a workshop or an adventure. Next up is Patagonia for me in a week, so I'm super excited about that, and switching gears from dogs to cats and pumas. Follow along, and if anyone ever wants to reach out, I'm more than happy to, if they have any questions. Or I feature Tom McPherson and Seaforth in my online class. It's 169 Canadian, which is about $1 American, I think, at this point. So it's not going so well for us, but it's really great for Americans. Come up to Canada, go out to Vancouver Island, British Columbia, Alberta, Ontario. We have owls here. Tomorrow I'm going out to photograph the snowy owls and the shorties and barred owls and rough-legged hawks and all kinds of flying critters. So, Canada is amazing and wonderful and incredible, and it's a beautiful place to photograph. So, yeah, Instagram, my website,
everything else. Yeah. And we're obviously, anybody who's listening, we always have the accounts and the websites and all the stuff in the description. So please go there and check that out. final thing for you, Michelle, is when you hear the word wolf, what is the thing that comes to your mind?
Howling. At this point, when you say that, just because I'm still resonating in the amount of howling and the communication and how important that is for all of us, is they're so incredibly communicative. And I think the world is lacking a lot of communication at this point and working together. They work as a pack. So there are a lot of lessons that the wolves can give us all. And so I don't know if I could say there's one thing, but anyway, the howling for me in the past, just a week ago, was pretty extraordinary. So yeah, they have a lot to teach us, don't they? That's what
they do. Yeah. It's the communication, the vibration. I love it. I saw you shaking too, which is, shaking with joy, obviously, with that whole experience. That was so amazing. Michelle Valberg, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your experiences and your knowledge and your thought processes through your journey through photography. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, John. It was a pleasure. And how long were we?
We're good. We're almost going to wrap up. So hang tight when we sign off. But thank you, Michelle. How's to you all out there? We'll be with you next time. Bye, everybody. Looking for more information about Wolf Connection or the podcast? Please visit our website at wolfconnection.org, where you can donate, sponsor a wolf, or become a volunteer.